song, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mwimbona kufuala matai temukalale nafyarilwe mwimbona majeke tokulepa nandibona alikwata kwesu shabanga bana banumba basyaisiboko bafuma tetinda byokulumbanya nalikwata nechirumba umumone boye kwesu fe babele nokusamba panika umumone boye kwesu fe babele nokusamba panika nefumushisana shakuteka pamwe wayevakalamba kwabashirisha kumulundu nibamwasa kombe kachitembo shimbichirisha kabangulu nibambuluwe kabamulombe nefumushisana shakuteka pamwe wayevakalamba kwabashirisha kumulundu nibamwasa kombe kachitembo shimbichirisha kabangulu nibambuluwe kabamulombe kama mwana wasongola meno nena bakwabu nitambi mwana wasongola meno nena bakwabu nitambi mwana wakolo tokumenso nabo bene kwabu nitambi mwana wakolo tokumenso nabo bene kwabu nitambi mwana misisi ya pemu nena bakwabu nitambi mwana misisi ya pemu nena bakwabu nitambi amubika wile kisungu mukalale mwena temunyabo namubika wile kisungu mukalale mwena temunyabo alakumumba nebo ekwesu sebabele nokusamba panika inombano mbulene nikoa ekwisi befyo na ikala nombano mbulene nikoa ekwisi befyo na ikala batatane bubena mumba batani nekisikiwali bamayo bena balungu nambunjiri abena kasi nombo kupanka nentambi nemuine ndipina kasi umumba nebo ekwesu sebabele nokusamba panika
Good evening, Zambia. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're joining us this evening. Welcome to another special edition of TV Bakwetu. This evening, I get the pleasure to interview the man who interviews almost everyone. The man behind TV Bakwetu. The one and only Dr. Elias Munshya. Good evening, Doc.
Good evening, Frank. I'm very excited to join you on this special presentation on the last day of the year, Frank.
It is another year. The year just flies by very, very quickly. It feels like it was yesterday we were saying Happy New Year 2021, and we're going into the new year already. Did you have a nice Christmas? Did you have a nice Christmas?
Yes, I did. I had a very exciting Christmas. We had family. So I had my sister-in-law, I had my cousin, I had my wife and our children, and so on. So it was a very intimate Christmas, and so we enjoyed ourselves.
And the weather was how cold? How cold was it? Did you have a white Christmas?
This Christmas, no, it was a white Christmas. It was very cold. Like even this week, so the week after Christmas, we are still in a semi-emergency situation due to the cold. This is where you really must put off any unnecessary travel. We are not moving up and down. We are sitting at -25, -26, and once you add the wind chill to these, it's -32 or -33. So that's pretty cold.
Too cold for anyone, really. It's very, very cold. So over the years, we sat down, we watched you, we've joined you, and people really and people have followed TV Bakwetu over the last few years, and I was just intrigued and goes, right, so there's a man who does all these things that he does, but we want to know the man behind the man who does all these other things that he does. So every good story always starts from the beginning, doesn't it, Dr. Munshya? Every good story starts from the beginning. So if you tell us, where were you born?
So I was born in Chingola. So there is a clinic, very famous clinic in Chiwempala. It's known as Chawama Clinic. That's where all of us, most of the people in Chiwempala, were born. That is those that were born at the house. But yeah, at it's known as Chawama Clinic. It's now like Chawama Hospital, Chawama Mini Hospital, something like that. Yes, in Chingola.
So you're a true Chiwempala boy then?
Yes. Yeah.
And then school-wise, where did you go for primary school and your secondary schooling? Where did you do those?
I think primary school was all over the place. My father was a teacher. Now, during the time that we were born, Frank, you're far much younger than me, so you wouldn't really relate to this. Maybe you could. But my father was a secondary school teacher. In those days, Kenneth Kaunda's policy was that you could serve anywhere. So they could come at midnight, transfer you from one end of the nation to another. And so there was a lot of mobility in the civil service, like almost forced mobility. There was nothing like you were stationed in one area and you're going to stay there. So I started my grade 1 in Chipata at Mpezeni Park Primary School in 1985 at Mpezeni Park Primary School. That's where I did my first grade. I think we might have done a few months in Chipata. Then my father got transferred from Hillside Secondary School to guess where? Mulea Secondary School in Chidilabombo. So from one end of the nation to Chidilabombo of all places. So in Chidilabombo, there was no accommodation in Chidilabombo proper itself. So we went to Konkola. And Konkola is not very far, right? It's very close. So we were accommodated in Konkola. So I transferred to Konkola Primary School. Then from Konkola Primary School, went to Chidilabombo Primary School. Chidilabombo Primary School then went to Lubengele Primary School. From Lubengele Primary School, then we moved to Chingola, back to my roots. And so that's where that's where I completed my my primary school at Twatasha Primary School.
And then how many secondary school did you have to go to? He went to a lot of school, just to remind you, Tavale Batamfia, you've just been transferred.
There's some people who think, so I list these primary schools, and some of our friends are like, you were a naughty child. No, I really wasn't a naughty child. I was a victim of very serious circumstances, you know. Mpezeni, Konkola, Chidilabombo, Lubengele, and the fifth and last one was Twatasha Primary School. And it was all because of mobility of my father, who was a school teacher. And at one time he resigned from teaching, you know, and so we went back to Chingola, which is like our second village, kind of, if not our third village. So for secondary school, I was fortunate enough to go to Chingola Secondary School from grade 8 up to grade 12. Yeah, I almost left after my grade 9 exams, but I was escaped. So at secondary school at Chingola High School, I was third highest in my grades, right?
Yeah.
So they picked the top 2 to go to guess where? To either Hillcrest or DK. And then they skipped me. I was number 3. And then they went and picked my friends who did not score as many marks as I did, but because they were doing a course known as technical drawing. Anyway, so that kept me at Chingola, at Chingola Secondary School. And so to all my TD friends, keep it up.
Oh, even I, Mr. Munshya, TD, I couldn't touch those things. I look at it, I'm thinking, what's that all about? I don't understand all of that.
Yeah.
And then talk about the decision. So when you finish your high school, then obviously reach a point where we choose careers. So you're an ordained minister.
Yes.
Yeah. So when did you make the decision to be a minister, and how did that come about? Where did you get the inspiration from?
It's a little complex. My Pentecostal faith it's gone through a lot of changes. The 90s were a certain phase of Pentecostalism, a little mature faith, but also a little bit more new. And so we were born again at a time when there was this growth in Pentecostalism. Pentecostalism had gotten a lot of leeway into public life. The president was Pentecostal, the vice president was Pentecostal, several ministers were Pentecostal. Pentecostal clergy were very influential politically. So those were the 90s. So when I completed my high school in about 96, I then decided that I was going to be a preacher. And so after I completed my high school, I then went to So after I completed my high school, I then went to a theological school. Now, one of the things that happened was that most of my friends that were receiving what is known as the call, right? We would call it the call of God. They would go to Bible schools. So by Bible schools, I mean maybe they go for a year, get trained as preachers, and then they begin serving or something like that. Some would not even go to a theological college. But the friends that I had at that time, they said, you go to a theological college. And so that's how I decided to go to a theological college, and that's how I sorry about that. That's how I went to a theological college. I completed my first degree in about 2000 or 2001, and came back to Lusaka to begin serving as a preacher.
So what was the first church that you served in as a minister?
It's known as Grace Ministries. So Grace Ministries, Frank, I don't know when you left Zambia, but you must have left very young. Grace Ministries is this charismatic Pentecostal church that broke off the United Church of Zambia. Right. So the United Church of Zambia, more traditional, more mature church, but there is this new movement within its circles, charismatics, and then they decide they were either expelled or they broke off, whatever it is. So they organized themselves around a leader known as Reverend Evans Chiresakunda at that time, and then they formed Grace Ministries. And so that was the first church that I joined after I completed my theological training. However, my church in Chingola is also known as Grace, but it's just not Grace Ministries. It's known as Grace Fellowship Family Church. And the leader at that time was Pastor Mumbaka Lusenga in Chiwempala.
So when you went to theological school, when you went to study of theology, you didn't go to study. You were not studying affiliated to any particular denomination, were you?
Yeah, because affiliation, we as Pentecostals, affiliation is very loose, right? So yeah, we have a very loose definition of what affiliation is as Pentecostals. And so yes, so I was I was a member of Grace Fellowship Family Church of Chingola, but I went to a theological college, and I joined the owners of that college, who are the Assemblies of God missionaries. So for as long as I was in theological school, I was part of the Assemblies of God. So the Assemblies of God is one of the most successful Pentecostal mission agencies in the world, having been established mostly in America, and then they had several other missionaries around the world. So that is the church that I was at during the time that I was training. And then when I completed my degree in theology, I went to Lusaka and started working for Grace Fellowship, for Grace Ministries Mission at a Bible college. So I became a lecturer at a Bible college, and was also connected to the main church at that time, which used to be called Highway Church along Kafue Road. So my main duty was to teach at the Bible college, and in addition to those duties, I was one of the young pastors at the main church, and Reverend Evans Chivesa Konda, as he used to be called then.
And then, obviously, so you're serving as a minister. Then the opportunity. How did the opportunity to go to Canada come about?
All right, so I was serving as a lecturer at the Grace, at a theological college, which is established by Grace Ministries, and I'm teaching theology. I'm preparing pastors to serve. I was very pushy about having theologically trained pastors. I believe in education. I believe that if Pentecostalism were to grow, it needed maturity. It needed theological maturity. I was immature myself because I was only 21 or 22 years old when I started doing that. Rubbed some of the leaders of our church the wrong way, but yeah, I rubbed them the wrong way.
Zambian elderly people, they don't like a young person walking in a room and saying, "This is how
some were not elderly. Some of them were not elderly, but I was very emphatic on the fact that we needed a little bit more education. And and this education was needed across the board. So I served teaching theology, but I knew that I had passions for politics, I had passions for law, I had passions to enhance my education myself. And that's how, after serving in Grace Ministries for about 5 years, the door opened to come to Canada to do a Master of Divinity degree.
And then, so you go to Canada, you do your degree. Then how does law come into play after you've done the other degree? What of all the things, what goes on in your mind to go, actually, I'm gonna study some law as well?
Sometimes some of these things happen by accident. Some of them happen by complete chance. Nevertheless, so let's go back to the 2001. So after I finished my first degree in theology, I wanted to enroll for a law degree immediately, and I tried University of South Africa, but that did not work. Then I tried the Zambian Open University, and I actually got accepted to study for a law degree at the Zambian Open University. I don't remember very well whether it was 2002 or 2003, but I received my acceptance letter. I did not follow through it. I can't remember why, but I've always been fascinated by faith, by theology, by politics, and so taking a degree in law was a natural progression, in my opinion. So when I missed out on that chance to study at the Zambian Open University, I came over here in Canada, and so after finishing several other studies here, I decided to enroll in a law degree finally, with a British university.
And I think you've touched on this. I've looked at some of the universities you've been to. They're quite some good universities you've been to. One of the universities is quite near where I used to live. So that's the Cardiff University, South Wales University in Cardiff. I used to live about 15 miles away from there. But for me, what's interesting is, so you've got this desire to learn new things, to learn things around. When did this desire to learn for you? Where did this come from, and how did it grow? Is it on to the fact that your father was a teacher?
Yes, I think so. I think it was because of that environment. I think my father did provide that learning environment. He was a teacher, very intellectual. He would discuss politics with me, with us. He would tell us stories, political stories, and international affairs that we did not know about. He used to teach French language and civics. So that's junior secondary school, French and civics. So then in our house, we would have a lot of books. So I look back and I'm thinking, why did we have so many books? Some of them still had date stamps of the various schools. So that's funny, because those books should not have been in our house.
Just gonna say.
But for some reason, they were. All right, so we had several books. We had like the Resource Atlas. I don't know whether we still have the Resource Atlas in Zambia currently, but there was a junior secondary school Resource Atlas that had a lot of international relations, a lot of politics, a lot of civics. And me and my older brother would take time to actually memorize capital cities of countries. We would take time to memorize the GDP of countries. And so we would ask our father what GDP meant, and then he would explain to us what GDP was all about. So we would compare which country had higher GDP, where Zambia and Congo, by then it was Zaire, stood, where countries with the highest GDP were Sweden, GDP per capita, and all that. So I think it is that kind of environment that fostered my admiration and desire to study. The other thing was the expectation. So the expectation of the wider family, that is the extended family, where for some reason they perceived me to be someone who should be studying. I don't know how I can explain this, but there is this thing in the extended family where your uncles, your aunties, your cousins, they expect a certain of their nephew that this one is going to do well in school. I don't know whether it was because they saw the report cards or whatever it is, but they treated me that way. And I think that partially explains why I loved school and I went on to do fine, to do well.
It is good when families have that expectation. So I remember when I did my second master's, I finished and I said, "Oh, that finished." And one of my uncles said, "So," he didn't even say congratulations. He just said, "So when are you doing your PhD then?" That kind of thing. I'm not even thinking that way ahead. So it's good to have families who are able to see your potential and actually push you to do those things. So you're in Canada, you've set up your law firm. First of all, there's something that I'd like to address. I think I see a lot of people put this. They always say, yeah, you left the church, you left the church. You never left the church. You never left your ministry. You are still an ordained minister.
Yes. So this is a very complex question that nearly a lot of us who were born again in the 90s, Pentecostals who were born in the 90s, struggle with. I have read it from several people, like Dr. Jones Kasonso, our friend here, Dr. Kasonso. And then there is another friend of mine known as Mwewa, Charles Mwewa. So there are several of us born again during that time. And the biggest question that we have to struggle with was, what happens when you are born again in the 90s and you say that you've received the call? What happens after that? Those are some of the questions we've had to struggle with. When you then get a different direction, a different trajectory, have you abandoned the call or not? Right? But the 90s also present one of the biggest issues among us Pentecostals, and that is Nevas Mumba. Nevas Mumba, who he is a preacher quite all right, but then he gets involved in politics. So the life of Nevas Mumba changes a lot of stories about us in the 90s, because then we realize that you can be a preacher and still be involved in politics, be a lawyer, be an accountant, and that is okay. That is part of your call. And that is important, because we grow in the way we look at life, we grow in the way we perceive things, and life around us is also changing and growing. Yeah. And so we've not left. I've not left the church. I'm still a reverend. I'm still a preacher. So that is still part of me.
And it's interesting you say that, because obviously I'm an ordained minister in the New Apostolic Church, and obviously our church is made up of lay ministers. We have to do the day job, and I find being able to do a other day job in the week, and I can sympathize with the members a lot more, because I'm not locked away at my church. I go out in the world, I understand the struggles that the members face, and actually just opens your eyes to what is actually going on.
Yes, so that's correct. So you see, the New Apostolic, if that is your church, because Taulandi,
that's my church, yes.
Yes. So their outlook is slightly different, but our Pentecostal outlook was very different, because it was an immature. We were theologically immature and culturally immature as well. You know, it's only now that we are growing, and so because of that, it's far much easier for New Apostolics, for the Catholic churches, for example, to easily integrate faith and vocation. There is no problem. But there was an issue, particularly, this does not apply to Pentecostals that are coming in the 2000s. It was a huge issue for Pentecostals that were formed in the 90s. The issue of integration of vocation, as well as what we would call the call. And so even today, there are some people from the 90s generation who accuse Nevas Mumba of having abandoned the pulpit or having abandoned the call. And Nevas Mumba's answer is the answer that a lot of young people in my situation are able to give, and say, no, when we are serving as lawyers or as consultants or as doctors or as politicians, we are serving God. We may not be like I've made it a point that we are going to preach differently. We may not be quoting scriptures, but every day on my wall, I try to inspire someone, try to change our country, because we owe our country a lot, and embrace the change, because that is part of it.
That is life. The only thing I always say to when I'm speaking to people is, the only thing that is constant in this world is change itself. Nothing ever stays the same. Everything changes. So I was looking at a video that I'd never seen before. You actually had hair. You actually had hair on that video. it was before 2016. I said, oh yeah, so he was doing videos in 2016. We never heard of him. And I remember the time I watched a video of you. It was about 2016. President Hichilema get arrested. He gets charged with treason. And first of all, the other thing that I would like to point out is, before I get to that part of it, I think a lot of people see you talk and you passionately talk about issues. And in all the in opportunities that I've had to talk with you in the background, and the people, what I've heard from people who've met you in person, is you are not a talker in person. You are very introverted.
Frank, how am I supposed to answer that?
No, you're not supposed to answer that. I'm making a point. Don't answer that. Yeah. I'm making a point. So you're very,
It's true, Frank. I think I am an introvert, and people don't believe it when I say that I'm an introvert. But you, Frank, having related with you, I think you do understand that I'm on the quiet side.
There's like literally when we press the off live button, you like switch. You kind of go in this moment. It's like, oh, it's like two men there. So then this brings me to a very important point, because you're very introverted, and for what I know with the points that you make, you're not really an argumentative person either. You're not really an argumentative person. So when you decide to talk about an issue, it's something that is in your heart. It's something that you feel strongly that you have to talk about. So 2016, our now president gets arrested, gets charged for treason. So you are sat in Canada, you're comfortably. Well, why don't you just keep quiet and get on with your life? Why do you decide, I'm going to make a stand on this now?
Because deep down my heart, I really do not like injustice. I think that is what made me get involved. I think it was unjust for the government to do what it did to then opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema. And I felt like we owed the country a duty. The country was being mismanaged, and the arrest of opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema at that time was just a symptom of the mismanagement. And there are so many things that would discourage me from speaking out. I had friends in the Patriotic Front. I had family in the Patriotic Front. And so it would have been very easy to just close my mouth and continue with whatever. But the country was headed in the wrong direction. And we could tell immediately after 2015 that this new president that was elected did not have the interests of the country at heart. And so we owed Zambia a duty to respond. And that's how I responded.
And I think it's a very important point to make. I think a lot of times, as human beings, we always say these things need to get better, and that needs to get better, but we actually don't do anything about the change. So, and I think somebody says if you really want to go and see change, you have to do something about it. So it was very, very important, and people started listening, and then there was an animal called Bill 10. That big animal that was being brought about, and I think some people still do not understand the implication that Bill 10 had. And you put in a lot of work. I think that almost became like a full-time job, because you were coming in, and I can remember you coming in every day talking for 2 hours about Bill 10. Why were you so passionate? I understood the explanation. I understood why were you so passionate, and why did you invest so much of your time? Because you could have done something else. You could have looked for clients and did other stuff, but you went and did so much studying, so much research. Why did you invest so much of your time in Build 10?
Frank, because Zambia matters and Zambians matter. And there is no other explanation. Our country matters, and we owe our country a duty to help it when the country is in need. During the Build 10 debate, our country was in need, and we could not turn back, turn on it and say, we are not going to help you. Sorry, we are busy because I want to do some billable hours. The legal profession is very lucrative. You bill by the hour. Every hour that you are not billing, you are losing good income. But Zambia needed us. Perhaps that is why we were away from it for a little bit. Perhaps that's why I got a degree in law. Perhaps that's why I studied the way I did, in order to help our country when our country needs us. Zambia needed us during the Build 10. And so the other thing was, I noticed that coming in English, in the English language, was not going to be helpful. There was a lot of explanation to do in the English language. And so I went back to speaking Bemba. Now, Frank, I need to tell you something here, because growing up at Chingola Secondary School, or growing up as a young boy, so in all these primary schools, I was brilliant, I was intelligent, quite all right. But my Bemba was never the Bemba of my peers. Each time I spoke in Bemba, they would tell me that I spoke like a villager. Now, I was born in Chingola. I had never lived in Milenge before. And so I avoided speaking Bemba. And I wanted to cover that village accent that I had. I don't know whether I got it from my parents or I got it from my extended family, but that was it. I never spoke like a Kopala person. I spoke like a villager in Chingola, at Chingola. I remember my friends telling me, we ran the Chivemba, or and the Chivembe chap kumushi. And so during the Build 10 time, I thought I needed to be liberated. So I went in Denver, I went in Ushi, I spoke the language as it did and explained to our people what Build 10 was all about. And very humbling that our people listened, they were tuning in. The Patriotic Front was listening, and when they lie, they will lie in the morning. When it's evening, we'll respond on time. The opposition was also listening at that time, the UPND. I have several of the MPs, and because my WhatsApp is always full, it's very difficult for me to follow up on messages. It's only now that some of the people who contacted me during the Build 10, I got the opportunity to respond, and their ministers. I look at it and I'm like, don't think that I did not respond during the Build 10 days for any reason, but maybe I just did not see the message. So it was very funny responding now to a message that one of the
forget that, because sometimes I'll send you a message and then you reply like 3 weeks later. I go, what were we talking about there?
Yeah. Our country needed us, and we responded.
Yeah. And then TV Bakwetu, as it were going, you were doing it on your own then. It was going well, it was getting audience. then it all just kicked off because you invited no other than Mr. No Munch Bakwetu to come onto TV Bakwetu. And that kind of changed the campaign, and that kind of changed the popularity of TV Bakwetu, and so the numbers. And I thought that was a very interesting duo. It was information. It was the passionate of general, and it was your knowledge, your research, your wanting to know the truth. And I thought that was important. That was a very great dynamic. How did you find that dynamic in that particular time for you? And what was your learning? What did you learn from that experience working with General?
Now, this is where, life, you are doing life and you have no idea that you are making history or being part of history. And it was just like routine for us. So you see, after the Buten, I have been involved in one way or another for many years in the affairs in Zambia as a writer, writing for newspapers, on using my Facebook page to provoke, agitate, and redirect. So that was for many years. And then the Buten, of course, meant that the information that Zambians could not have, we provided that platform. General, on the other hand, Mr. Norman Chipakupaku was also quite a very fierce warrior, social media warrior. Now, he is an old man, but he was very good with social media. And so everybody, most of the people that were involved in the politics of social media, they knew that account, Norman Chipakupaku. Others, in fact, thought that it was a fake account. But he was very passionate, and so beginning in the late 2000s, early 2000s, when Michael Sata wins and Hakainde Hichilema loses, and in 2015 election and all that, so there was all that work that he had already put in. And his networks, of course, having been part of UNIP and all those UNIP guys and all that. So he has his own history. He has his own story on social media. We were, of course, meeting, sometimes sharing same stories and stuff like that. But sometimes butting heads as well. Because, of course, in my long history in politics, I may have been on the different side of Mr. Norman Chipakupaku's political side. However, there was a time when I felt I needed to do something more with the political commentaries that I was doing, and I wanted to create a more of a dialogue, and so I had Dr. Jones Kasonso, of course. And so when the time came for us to try and create that dialogue, our face program was with Mr. Norman Chipakupaku and Dr. Kasonso. I think it was either on Saturday or something. And so we went live, and it was very well received. Of course, Dr. Kasonso, because he's an accountant, very much in demand. And the fact that our programs were coming during the day, it meant that for us here, it meant that we couldn't get him on time. However, after that program, so I had done a certain program, and then Mr. Norman Chipakupaku reaches out to me on Twitter, and he's like, I can help you explain some of these things. And I'm like, okay, that's exciting. So he comes on, Dr. Kasonso comes on, and we have that first program. I think it might have been, I can't remember whether it was May. We need to get that date correct because we need to celebrate our first anniversary. So when that happens, the program is very well received. And then I changed the name now, right? Because I was just coming as Elias Munshya. So I changed it to TV Bakwetu. We experimented with several logos until I settled on one logo. And then afterwards, We went live on one of the Sundays with just me and Mr. Norman Chipakopako, and for some reason we created a good team. You could feel it.
Yeah.
And not only could we feel it, but the listeners also could feel it.
It worked. It
It was
worked
not
in
very
an instant.
complicated production. Yeah, it was not a very complicated production. We were using StreamYard, and he himself, it was, just an ordinary light. He would come sometimes, dimmed or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think he had a passion, he had information, he had the time and the dedication. Because sometimes when I get busy here, he will check on me and say, Munshya, aren't we going up? Something has happened in Zambia. We need to respond. We go live. And so what started as every other day became daily. And we realized that we could use this as a tool to educate our people and drive out the government we believed was a government of thieves. And so that's how we formed that team. We formed that bond. Some of our audience thought that we had known each other for many years, or that we were in fact living in the same city or in the same place. No, but definitely the chemistry was there. The passion for politics was there. And then he had tremendous, Mr. Norman Chipakopako had a lot of connections back home. And so if I ask him for any person, he'll just tell me, I'm going to work on that. And so he brought several candidates of the UPND. He brought Panji, Colonel Panji Kaunda. We did, and when we could have Dr. Kasonso, he would come on as well. And so that is how TV Bakwetu grew. And the surprising thing is that the brand, so the brand grew tremendously faster than me, because I go back to Zambia and people are calling me Bakwetu, and I'm like, Bakwetu is a very brand new brand. I'm Elias Munshya, and I've been with you people since 2000 and what? Call me by Elias Munshya. No, but Bakwetu had just grown beyond expectations.
I think that an important thing for me at the time is you were given the message. You were given the message that people wanted to hear. It was what people were seeing on the ground. So whatever was coming out wasn't something that was made up. It was what people were seeing was happening or not happening. So that was very important, and it grew so fast, and you could see the PF starting to comment on TV Bakwetu and everything else, and you go, yeah, they're now scared, because it became a platform. There was no other media outlets back in Zambia that was talking about opposition. Most of them were pro-government. So it became an alternative, and people got tired of the media in Zambia. So then everyone was tuning in to TV Bakwetu. So that was an incredible. It became a whole movement on its own. So it was incredible to be part of that. Then this brings me to the question. Us Zambians were very, very difficult. So you came in and you've done the things that you wanted to. You passionately talked about electing a new government. You are not UPND, and you were not after a job, as it were, as the message goes. You came and you did what you did because you were passionate and you thought UPND was alternative government, not because UPND promised you a job. Which was a lot of things that people come on. And they talked about all the things that went on. You see the comments that comes in. So, and I'm going to move on to another question. So we get a new president. I think we expected some of the changes to happen very, very quickly. And I think from the beginning, you're quite critical that changes were not happening quick enough. And I think you get an opportunity to get 2 minutes with the president. And I think you came back and your view had changed a little bit. Did you feel, you don't have to go into details, did you feel you got your answered question that satisfied you that this government is on the right platform, is on the right path?
Now, coming to the impatience. Now, the impatience was not just. I am on the other hand. I think I am also quite passionate about the ordinary people, what they feel, what they want, and so I am a servant of the Zambian people, in a different way, through TV Bakwetu, through Facebook, through social media. And so I feel I'm a servant of the people of Zambia, and so we were channeling the frustrations that were on the ground at that time. And so we played our part for the first month to say we need to see changes very quickly. We felt like the former ruling party still had control of much of the government infrastructure. That became slightly worrying. We were concerned with the messaging. We don't know where the messaging was coming from, but the messaging, to the extent that it gave the impression that the UPND rank and file are not necessary to run in government, we needed to correct that and speak for them and encourage all the soldiers, and by soldiers I'm using BF language, speak to all the people that were on the ground that had campaigned very heavily. And we wanted to advocate for a situation where the UPND does not abandon its soldiers on the ground. And so that was a very critical time. But the government was responding, I think. When we saw that ministers were taking too long, we were like, what's going on? And we shouldn't say that it was because of our advocacy, because at this time, our TV Bakwetu has now grown into a crew, into a family. You know, you yourself, even if you were present right from around May or June, but we crystallized as a group mostly around August.
Yeah.
And so we have this duty to Frank, this duty to Linda, to Gladys, to Himba, to Mkelabai, to Pesi, and several of our TV Bakwetu family. And so our response was as a result of the kind of responses that we were receiving on the ground, the frustrations that people were having. And we tried to change the narrative that the UPND must govern. And that's why we said, our winner my elections, ever take a child. You know? And yes, I did have the chance to go and celebrate the independence. I went there. And I got a little bit of perspective, the perspective that we needed the grassroots to have. And now we are giving that perspective to the grassroots. We are giving that perspective to the diaspora. And I think we are headed in the right direction.
So now we've done, the elections are over. We're all, so for other people who've been watching, have seen, we now have different segments going on in TV Bakwetu. In just a few words, what other plans we got for TV Bakwetu?
There are several. First of all, TV Bakwetu, now, after the elections, and a lot of people have observed to say, what is happening to your audience? And I'm like, our audience is now governing a nation. Before that, they were not governing a nation. No, but busy. A vice president, I'm a permanent secretary, I'm a thesis, and we were part of that story. And so yes, we expected this reduction in the numbers, in the online numbers. But we must organize, as you know, Frank, we must organize as TV Bakwetu, and we must do several other programs. That's why we have you, Frank, doing the Frank Motivation with Frank every Thursday, and we are open to that. That's what TV Bakwetu is going to do. As far as politics is concerned, we thought our job was done. It was over. We had ushered in the new government, and so there's nothing else to do. However, the government that was defeated, it still continues to be extremely arrogant, the party that was there, and it wants to come back. And so when it wants to come back, it is lying to the people of Zambia. And so we can't abandon the struggle midway. Our work did not finish because President Hakainde Hichilema was elected into office. Our work continues to see that this country does not continue to be given a road deal, does not continue to entertain thieves that stole from it. And so that is what I see TV Bakwetu continuing to do. As long as this government continues on the right trajectory, prioritizing the economic welfare of our people, tomorrow, with the new budget, it will mean that constituency development funds, 25.7 million. Now, I want to stay away from most of the political talking points, but that is just reality. It means Milenge is going to receive 25.7 million in its coffers, CDF, in Milenge. Chingola, Chwempala, it's going to receive twice that much. We need to encourage that. We need to look at that and recognize those important decisions that have been taken. Employing new teachers, 30,000 new teachers effective tomorrow, 30,000 new teachers. And so when we see a person like President Hakainde Hichilema and his political party, the United Party for National Development, make all these strides, we need to encourage. And so when the opposition comes in and they have still holding on to the money that they've stolen, and they come back to try and frustrate that agenda, we have a duty to respond and help this government and this country. If this government begins the bad manners of the PF, we are going to hold it to account. But now, this government is trying very hard to build what was completely broken in our country: economy, justice, equality, tribalism, discrimination, lack of focus. No focus at all. And so because of that, we still have a job to do.
And I absolutely, I concur with you there. I think it's something that Zambian people have to think about. They're teachers who were trained 10 years ago. And these teachers are only going to get the opportunity to be posted now. I got relatives who've been waiting to be posted for years. So we've had teachers staying at home, and we've had pupils not being taught because there's not enough teachers. We've had resources being spent elsewhere because they can afford to take their children to schools out of the country, so they don't bother about your children. So it's important in everything that we do. And just to echo what Dr. Elias said, we support the government for what they're doing. If they stop doing what they're doing, what is right for the people, we don't support them. And that's why we came every week. And that's why I took part. I never used to do politics. I never used to get any conversation to do with politics. I was going to avoid that. But it reached a point where I need to join in. I need to put my voice to it. So it's important, all that we do, that we see what the government is doing, we look at what the government is doing, we look at where they're sending their resources to, and we support that, and we support the development of our country. Dr. Elias, all I like to say is thank you. Thank you so much for providing the platform. And thank you so much for teaching us young people that for there to be true change, you can't just sit back down. You have to speak out. It's the voices of people. And here at TV Bakwetu, we now have a collection of voices. We got same opinions, we got different opinions, but we got a collection of voices that speak up for our people. And all I like to say is thank you for inviting us into TV Bakwetu and setting up the platform, and thank you for your passionate to serve our people. It's a great lesson for us young people, and whether we are in Zambia or whether we are living abroad, that it's always reminder that we always remember where we come from. And for me, it's before the elections, it was a time probably I was focused so much on life here, but it just gave me a reminder to say, Frank Saliki, remember where you come from. Remember people back home. Remember putting your voice in everything that you know, in everything that you learn. You've learned so much. I was going to read through all your degrees, but I might be here for a long time, so I won't. You've learned so much, but thank you so much for not keeping that knowledge to yourself, for sharing that knowledge with all of us.
Frank, thank you. You believed in TV Bakwetu very early, Frank. And it is because of you and several young men and young women around that kept us coming back. There was a country that needed help, but there was also a lot of people who believed in this project. We found a name for it, and it's amazing what a name can do to aspirations that you have as a people. And then here we are. And so thank you, Frank, and thank you to the entire TV Bakwetu family. We just came together and crystallized. Nobody went like, hey, so join it. You know what I mean? But we crystallized together because Zambia matters. We all matter, and we are going to continue serving. If a country requires another opportunity to serve it, TV Bakwetu should never say no.
So, my friends, that was an interview with the man behind TV Bakwetu. I don't think you're going to see a lot of times him being interviewed. I think we're going to go back to him interviewing people. Listen, thank you so much for your time. I know it's during your working time. That was an absolute delight to be able to talk to you, to be able to talk about your life, to be able to see where your passion comes from. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sparing the time to talk to me this evening, this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you to our viewers.
And Bakwetu family, don't forget also, if you are able to buy some stars, this is what keeps us going. Our aim is to educate our people back home, is to educate everybody to know what is actually going on. And if you want to be part of a Bakwetu family as well, you can see there's a blue button there. Then you become a member. It's about £3.45 I pay. You can buy a cup of coffee easily with that. £3.45 a month, and you can be part of the Bakwetu family and also enjoy our backstage crew and get to meet your favorite TV Bakwetu people. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. From everyone on TV Bakwetu, we wish you a wonderful and prosperous new year, and may God bless you and God bless our country, and we shall see you soon. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.